Okay, now when you are recruiting, Charlie, look for knockout factors. Is there anything that could prevent you from accepting an offer right now? Anything personal? Anything medical? Are you interviewing anywhere else? Are you expecting any promotions at your own company? Some big billers, not all, some big billers routinely make candidates that they are going to send out on interviews go to their own employers first and ask, what are your plans for me? Am I going to get a promotion? Am I going to get a raise? What does the future look like for me right now? You see, because if you can get the candidate to find out that there are things that would keep him at this company, better you find out now than when the candidate gets the offer. Now, I'm not going to recommend that for everybody. It takes some sophistication to do that, and it adds a step to the process, which I don't want new guys to be involved in. Knockout factors. Bottom line, what is the minimum amount of money that you would accept to change positions? The minimum. Now, if our $40,000 candidate says, well, the minimum amount of money that I would accept to change positions is $55,000, what are we going to tell them? You're unreasonable. That's right, it is unreasonable. The reasonable range of expectation for a candidate changing positions is 5% to 15%. That's the reasonable range of expectation. And in all cases, we're going to try and close our candidate at 5% and close our company at 15% and keep a spread between the two. Now, of course, when we say what's the minimum amount of money that you would accept to change positions, we want to hear something around 10%. So our $40,000 candidate says, well, the minimum that I would take is $44,000. That's reasonable. We're now going to look and see if there's any play in that. Well, would you accept $40,000? Would you take a lateral for a perfect opportunity? No, it wouldn't take a lateral. Would you take $42,000 for the ideal opportunity? No, it wouldn't take $42,000. The minimum, the rock bottom that I would take is $43,000. Okay, make a note of that. We've moved them down $1,000, minimum but shaky minimum. Charlie, you've got a good background. You got good reasons for wanting to make a change. You have answered all my questions correctly. I'm going to present you to my client company. Now, with all due respect, one tax accountant has the same title, duties, and money as another tax accountant. I don't want to present you as a tax accountant. I want to present you as a person who could do something for this company, a person who is special. And right now, Charlie, I know nothing about you as a person. So let's talk. Now, I want you to talk to Charlie about Charlie. I want you to find out 3 categories of information. Personal, what makes him tick? What are his interests? Find out about the person. What could he do for the employer? You want to find out what the benefit would be. Why should they hire him instead of all the other tax accountants with the same title, duties, and money? What could he do for them? And then what's special about him? Achievements and accomplishments. We're going to use those 3 categories of information to sell Charlie back to the company. Remember, when we presented the job order to Charlie, we didn't present title, duties, and money. We presented opportunity at company. Well, likewise, when we present Charlie to the company, we're not going to present title, duties, and money. We're going to present benefit and achievement accomplishment. And beware, recruiters, because candidates are not comfortable selling themselves. You may have to ask the same question several times. You'll have to bring them out a little bit, put them at ease. But I want you to get that information. You are not in a position to sell that candidate until you have that information. All right, Charlie, good. I am going to present you to my company right now. Give me some interviewing times. When's it convenient for you to interview? Now, before we get off the phone, here's the last thing we say to Charlie. Charlie, by the way, let's role play for a minute. I present you to this company, you go out on 3 interviews, and they make you a $44,000 offer. You accept, go back to your company to resign, and they make you a $44,000 counteroffer. Are you going to take it? Ask him right now. See, he hasn't had time to contrive an answer. It's the very first conversation. He'll give you a candid, unrehearsed answer. Charlie, they make you a counteroffer of $44,000. Are you going to take it? What is the range of acceptable responses to that question? No, that's right. No, I'm not going to take it. We are cross-qualifying right here. See, Charlie, they make a counteroffer of $44,000. Are you going to take it? If Charlie says, well, I have to think about it, is he a 1? No. And if Charlie says, if Charlie is a 1, what's he going to say? No. He's going to say no. We are cross-qualifying. We were also cross-qualifying with dollars when we asked what's the minimum you take. You see, a 1 is going to give us a reasonable number, and somebody who gives us an unreasonable number is not a 1. Okay, now when you are recruiting, Charlie, what if he asks, who's the company? Sorry, I can't tell you that on this call, Charlie. I'm going to present you to my client company, and if they want to see you, I will get back to you and let you know who they are. Don't give up the name of your client company on the first call. That's your asset. Protect it. You have no idea how much competition you create for yourselves when you give up the name of your client company. You talk to Charlie. You tell him your client company is Ampex. Charlie tells the guy sitting next to him, guess what? Ampex is looking for a guy just like me. This guy calls his favorite recruiter and says, guess what? Ampex is looking for a guy just like Charlie. This recruiter calls this guy, places him, and you never know what happened to you. Don't give up the name of your client company. Think of how many leads you've gotten, how many placements you've made because some candidate opened up and told you who the company was. Protect the name of that client company. What to say if Charlie says, is that Ampex? And it is. Well, you could lie and say no. You could tell the truth and give up your asset, but you don't want to do either of those things. Is that Ampex? Why, Charlie? Is Ampex looking? Answer a question with a question. Have you interviewed at Ampex? Last thing we want to do if Charlie's interviewed at Ampex is present him there, because all we're going to do is make him look good, and we're not going to get the fee. Charlie says, where did you get my name? Well, if you dug him up, if you were referred to Charlie, I was referred to you. If you can name the source, name the source. If you just dug him up, tell him, look, identifying good people is what I do for a living. And if you want to really lay it on, say, frankly, Charlie, someone as good as you are isn't hard to find. But save that for special occasions. Charlie says, specifically, how much is the company willing to pay? Well, Charlie, the salary is open, depending upon your experience and current earnings. But now, you profile Charlie and you find out that he's earning 49, and you know the ceiling on this position is 50. He's earning 49, ceiling's 50. Do you let him continue to believe the salary's open? No, sir, absolutely not, because he can legitimately expect an increase to 53, 54. You have to now tell him, Charlie, when I got on the phone with you, I didn't realize how much you were earning. The fact is, ceiling on this position is 50. Now, you should still interview because, and let's sell the merits of the position. Meanwhile, we're going to go back to the company and say, look, we found your guy. Here's his background, but he's earning 49. Come up with 53 or 54. If we can get Charlie to interview based on the merits of the position with an expectation of 50, and then get the company to come up with 53 or 54, we've got a formula for a hire taking place. What to do if the candidate is too light or too heavy for the position? Say, look, you're too light, you're too heavy, here's why. I'll keep you in mind for future openings. Now, send me a resume, and once again, who do you know who can do this job? And when you ask that question, who do you know who can do this job, don't leave it there. Always plant suggestions. Who do you know who can do this job? Someone you left behind at your last company. Someone who's driving too far to work. Someone whose project is ending. Always plant at least 2 suggestions. You get more names. So Charlie says, yeah, you're right. I know someone. And you say, great, Charlie, what's his name? And he says, I want to call him, and I'll have him call you. Does that ever happen to you? How often do you get that call back? Never. Let's average the room here. Never. Yeah, never. So no, do we want the name? Do we want that name? We've described the position to Charlie. He knows somebody. Do we want that name? You bet. And we know he's not going to call us back, so let's go for it. Let's go for it right now. Charlie, we say to Charlie, who do you know can do this job? He says, yeah, I know somebody. Who is it, Charlie? No, I want to contact him myself. Charlie, he may not want you to know he's looking. He'll tell me, but he won't tell you. Now, what's his name? No, I want to contact him myself. Charlie, with all due respect, I can answer questions about the position that you can't, which might influence whether or not he's interested. What's his name? I really want to contact him myself. Charlie, look, do the guy a favor. You're probably going to be improving his career. I'll keep your name out of it, and I'll mention it later on if you'd like. What's his name? You got to keep asking what's his name, but you can't ask beyond this. If Charlie now says no, you got to say, okay, Charlie, you call him. I'll call you back in an hour, and get off the phone before he tells you not to. Just get right off the phone and call Charlie back in an hour. Have you spoken to him yet? And I promise you, I guarantee you Charlie hasn't. He has not made the call yet. Hang up, call Charlie back in another hour. Every hour, be there like a cuckoo clock. Be there like pain until Charlie gives up that name. Is he going to get annoyed? Yeah. Do we care? Normally we would, but not in this case. Not in this case. Charlie is standing in between this guy and an opportunity, and that's not right of Charlie to do that. So we want to just keep going after Charlie till we get that name. What to do if the candidate is nervous about disclosing his background to you, or the fact that he wants to change jobs to you? You're a stranger, and you're asking some very sensitive stuff. Charlie, relax. Confidentiality is my stock in trade. I will do nothing to jeopardize your current employment. And recruiters, please do nothing to jeopardize the current employment of your candidates. Nothing gives our industry a bigger black eye than the story of a recruiter who carelessly sends a resume to a different division of the same parent company. Or the story of a recruiter who carelessly checks a reference with the current employer. Do nothing to jeopardize the current employment of your candidates. All right. Now, it takes about half an hour to profile a candidate sufficiently so that you have enough information that you can answer any reasonable question about his background. And you want to have that much information before you pick up the telephone to call the employer. And you do want to pick up the telephone to call the employer as soon as you get off the phone with Charlie. This business, a placement, has 3 keys. The 3 keys are the 30 steps in the placement process, the characteristics of a good job order, and the characteristics of a good candidate. Those are the rails that a placement runs on. You see, if you're lining yourself up on those 3 keys, 30 steps, characteristics, good job order, characteristics, good candidate, the only placements you'll ever lose will be to competition, not to mistakes. Most recruiters lose most of their placements to their own mistakes. And we've already done 2 of the keys this morning, 30 steps and the characteristics of a good job order. Now we are going to do the 3rd key, which is the characteristics of a good candidate. What are the characteristics of a good candidate? Give me one.
The first thing, the candidate must be able to do the job.
Can do the job. That's right. And you notice we're not saying meets the specs, because very often the specs are written in an ivory tower and aren't exactly what the company wants. Can do the job. Give me another one.
Reasons for other than money.
Changing for reasons other than money. Money is a bad motivation. It may be a good motivation for the candidate, but it's not a good motivation for us. Another one.
They have to be realistic about the money and the specifications.
So if we're talking to a $40,000 candidate who wants $60,000, we're not going to work with them. We want our $40,000 candidate to be willing to move for about 10% or less. Another one.
You have to be cooperative, willing to work our way.
Somebody who's going to go on interviews if they're scheduled, take our calls, give us feedback, and take an offer if one is made. That's right, a cooperative candidate. Another characteristic of a good candidate.
He's reference checkable.
Reference checkable. Now, they don't have to be great references. Later on today, we're going to discuss references. They just have to exist and validate his ability to do this job. Another characteristic, good candidate.
Appearance.
Appearance. Now, you know what? Appearance is not a universal characteristic of a good candidate. It is for secretaries. It is for salesmen. It is for people who are in appearance positions. But I owned a firm that placed thousands of people in the electronics industry, and it was a good thing that my recruiters didn't meet most of them until after they went to work. Another characteristic of a good candidate.
The right chemistry.
Chemistry. Chemistry means how do they get along, and you know that chemistry component is as important as whether or not he can do the job. Given 5 people of equal ability, they're going to hire the one they like. Characteristic.
It has to be in the right geographical location or be willing to relocate.
You bet. So the candidate doesn't live too far from the job, or at least is willing to relocate if he lives in another state. Characteristic of a good candidate.
Not too long at the same company.
Not too long. And I'm going to tell you in a few minutes what too long is, but it's very important that our candidate have a pattern of movement. That's correct. And characteristic, final characteristic of a good candidate.
They have something to sell to the new prospective employer.
Something to sell besides title, duties, and money. We don't want to call up our employer and read a resume to them. We want to sell something. And what are we going to sell? We're going to sell the person. We're going to sell the benefit. We are going to sell the achievement and the accomplishment. Very important. Those are the characteristics of a good candidate. Before you start to work with a candidate, use this like a checklist. Does he have these? If he doesn't, don't work with him. Find somebody else. Does that require discipline? You bet. You bet it does. But it requires discipline, a lot of discipline, to be a good recruiter. But the rewards make it worthwhile. Now, let's move forward. I want you now to become students of candidate behavior. The behavior of the candidate who is going to take your job is at all times positive, enthusiastic, eager. I want it. I want it. Get me that next interview. Get me the offer. They want to move forward with it. Now, that behavior can change. It can change from enthusiastic to less enthusiastic, from eager to reluctant. It can change at any point throughout the process. It can change before or after the first interview. It can change before or after the second interview. It can change at the time of the offer. It can even change after the offer has been extended or accepted. Anytime the candidate's behavior changes, it means something. Now, most recruiters deal with changes in behavior in one of 2 ways. Either they ignore it, hoping that it will go away, or they start arm twisting. Oh, come on, you want to be interested, don't you? Don't you? You should be interested. Here's why. Twisting, twisting, twisting. That's not the right way to do it. Anytime you see a change in behavior, confront it. Find out what it means. And the change of the behavior that we're going to be recognizing, the behavior that we're going to be looking for, is number 1 behavior. And we're going to be looking at any change in behavior as a change from number 1 behavior. In other words, we're going to keep testing to see whether or not we are still dealing with a number 1. Now, that behavior can change as early as the first telephone call. You are 20 or 25 minutes into this conversation because the candidate said, I'm a number 1. And he gave you good reasons for being a number 1. And he was enthusiastic and he was eager. And he closed himself at a low number. Yeah, I'll take 43. Confirming status as number 1. Now, 25 minutes into the conversation, he starts saying things like, and this is after he's agreed to go out on the interview, starts saying things like, yeah, sounds like that company really needs me. I'd be interested in going out there if they gave me a corner office, Friday afternoons off, company boat. Starts dictating terms. Has that ever happened to you before? Sure. Sure. Is that the behavior of a number 1? Absolutely not. No, it's not. And how would most recruiters deal with that change of behavior, having gotten him to agree to go out on the interview already? Most recruiters would say, well, we can talk about that later. Why don't you go out on that interview? Isn't that true? Why don't you just get out there? And he'd hope that it would go away, or he'd hope that the company would handle it. That is not the way to deal with that. The right way to deal with that change in behavior would be to say, look, you don't sound as enthusiastic as you did 20 minutes ago. Here you are dictating terms and you haven't even been on an interview yet. I'll tell you what. You go home and think about this, and if you decide you want to proceed, you call me tomorrow morning and convince me to send you out there, because right now I am not convinced. Challenge him. Take it away. As hard as you can, take it away. You're going to find that you can't take an opportunity away from someone who really wants it. Now, I want to tell you about a law of candidate nature. The higher a candidate's demands, the lower his level of interest. The higher his level of interest, the lower his demands. It's a fulcrum. It's a fulcrum. It's called the interest demand barometer. It is an infallible gauge of how that candidate is feeling. We close the candidate at 43. Here's interest demand. Candidate now starts making demands. Let's say he comes out of the first interview, starts saying, I want 48. What's he telling us? Less interested. Demands go up, interest goes down. Candidate comes out of the first interview telling us, you know what, I take it for 40. What's he telling us? Lower demands, higher interest. Same thing on the first telephone call. Candidate closes himself at 43, starts making demands, want a corner office, company boat, Friday afternoons off. Boy, there goes that barometer like this. He's saying that he's not as interested as he was when we closed him at 43. Watch that interest demand barometer. Now, before we leave the subject of recruiting, I want to discuss the mistakes most often made by recruiters about candidates. And if you could just erase these mistakes from your repertoire, you would make more placements. Mistake, often made by recruiters, is being blinded by paper qualifications. You read a resume and you say, oh boy, this guy is great. And then you get him on the phone, and your brain and your gut says, wait a minute, this isn't the same guy that I was reading about. You know what? Believe your instincts. You talk to these guys all day long. If your instincts tell you this candidate isn't everything the resume says he is, I'd believe your instincts. Don't be blinded by paper qualifications. Mistake, often made by recruiters, adopting a candidate as a personal crusade. Have you ever done that before? Sure you have. You know why? Because recruiters have big hearts. And a candidate comes up to our office and tells us a story, and we say, I'm going to find that candidate a job if it kills me. And it usually does. And you send him out 4 or 5 times, 9 or 10 times, and he keeps coming in second or third. If he keeps coming in second or third, the marketplace is telling you something. If you want to take him home and feed him and take care of him, that's great, but don't spend all your time working with him. You're here to make placements. Mistake, often made by recruiters, is presenting candidates who live too far from the company. Here's how this one works. You've been working on this search for 3 days. You've spoken to 70 people, and you haven't come up with anybody. You are frustrated. And now you're on the phone with somebody whose background is perfect. They've got the right education, experience, salary level. They're a number 1, but they live 80 miles from the job. And you say, but you live 80 miles from the job. And the candidate says, oh, don't worry. I'll relocate. You know, ignore the fact that my wife works. We've lived there for 15 years. I will relocate. Or heck, I'll get an apartment there during the week. Or if I have to, I'll commute for a year. You want to believe it. You want to believe it because you haven't come up with anybody. He believes it. He's a number 1. He likes what he's hearing from you about the position. He believes it. You present him to the company. Company loves him. And they say, but you live 80 miles from us. He says, don't worry. Recruiter and I have that all worked out. They're going to make him an offer. Sure they are. And he's going to go home and say, okay, honey, let's move. All right, I'll tell you what. I'll get an apartment there during the week. Sure you will. And now he's going to start to commute. And of course, he interviewed at 11 and he interviewed at 2 in the afternoon. Now he starts making the drive at 6 in the morning and at 6 at night. He's going to do that for 2 or 3 days and turn the job down. Happens all the time. 1 out of 20 times it goes together. But you don't get a 3-to-1 send out to placement ratio by working with candidates who take jobs 1 out of 20 times. And you know what? Presenting them isn't the mistake. If you had the discipline to back them up, presenting them would be all right. It's not backing them up. That's the real mistake. You see, if you could send him in, know that he's a low percentage guy, turn your back on him and find more people, then it would be fine to present him. But because we don't have the discipline to back him up, don't even present him. Which brings me to the biggest mistake made nationwide by recruiters. Almost all recruiters make this mistake, except for the ones who make a lot of placements, of course. And you know what this mistake is? It is stopping the search after you've found one candidate that the company says they like. That is the single biggest mistake that recruiters make nationwide. And the company's just as guilty as the recruiter is. The company sees one person that you send in and they say, yeah, great, we like this person. Don't show us any more people. Let us go the distance with this one. And the recruiter says, all right. And then if you ask that recruiter, do you have backups? Yeah, that recruiter has backups. And if you explore what he means, backups are people sitting on his desk waiting to be presented for the first interview if this one falls apart at the third interview. That's not backups. Backups are people who are all interviewing at the same time for the first and for the second and for the third. Backups are people who are ready to get and take the offer if this candidate doesn't get and take the offer. You know, it's a shame that recruiters stop looking when they get one candidate in there because most of the work is spent finding the first candidate. Most of it. And if you could just work on it for a few more hours, you come up with a few more candidates because now you're into the right departments and you got the right referral sources. Don't stop presenting people. If the company says we don't want to see more people because we like this guy, tell the company, look, you got to see more people. Most of early #1 favorites don't get or take offers. More don't than do. Explain that to the employer. Tell them, look, instead of having to start this process over again, if this guy decides not to take an offer or if you decide not to make him one, let's have people ready to get and take the offer. How many more placements would you have made last year if every time you have the #1 candidate, you also had the #2 candidate? It's a bunch, isn't it? A whole bunch. Back up, back up. Mistake, often made by recruiters, is presenting candidates who've been at one company for too long. Boy, if I could teach you one thing that's going to put money in your pockets during your careers as recruiters, one simple thing is this. Do not work with candidates who've been at one company for longer than 7 years. Sounds kind of arbitrary, doesn't it? Procter & Gamble did a study 25 years ago about the psychology of tenure. And they discovered that after 7 years, the likelihood of a person leaving a company of his own free will diminishes to almost 0. And they used the findings from that study to adjust their wage increase and promotion policies, to the point where now at Procter & Gamble, as well as many other large companies, there are two classes of people. People who've been there forever, people who've been there for a few years. Which class of people is getting the wage increases and the promotions? People who've been there for a few years. Why? Company needs to do that to keep them. They don't need to give them to the people who've been there forever to keep them. Gravity keeps those people there. Inertia keeps them. Fear of change keeps them. Matter of fact, you know what? Procter & Gamble has a name, a corporate generic term for those people. They're called gray men. Xerox just picked up the same term. That's the term they used to describe them in their memos. Now, final mistake made by recruiters about candidates is forcing situations. When the candidate's telling you right up front, I'm happy. I've turned down 2 offers in the last year. I'm expecting a promotion. But I'm in a slump. I have gone 6 weeks without making a placement. I have had 30 send-outs without making a placement. And now I'm on the phone with somebody whose background is perfect. She's got the right education, experience, salary level, geographical location. If I asked, scale of 1 to 5, she'd tell me she's a 3 or a 4. 3 or a 4. But I'm not asking. I don't want to know. I mean, through the sheer power of my will, I'm going to get this person to go out on the interview and to take the job. I don't want to know whether she wants it or not. So I do that. I persuade her to go out on that interview. She goes out and she goes back and starts saying things like, yeah, nice company, nice people. I'm winning now. So I get her out there for the offering interview. They're going to make her an offer. She's perfect. And she's going to turn it down on the spot. She told me she was going to turn it down first time I talked to her, but I wasn't listening. Don't work with people that you have to drag kicking and screaming through the process. If we're doing our jobs right, we're just clearing the way for candidates and companies to come together who want to be together. We have now recruited a candidate. We've taken a job order, recruited a candidate who is qualified and interested. Now all we have to do is present him to the employer and make a placement.